The rooms we kept. Chapter 1, the first time she touched him after 23 years, it was only to remove a thread from his sleeve. Nothing else. 2 fingers brushing dark wool beneath the muted chandelier light of the hotel lobby. But his breathing changed. She heard it. And because she heard it, she withdrew too quickly, which made the gesture intimate in a way neither of them could survive gracefully. Across the room, someone began laughing too loudly at something unimportant. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The conference badges hanging from their necks turned slowly on their cords. Around them, glasses clinked. A waiter crossed the marble floor with the careful expression of a man balancing other people's evenings in his hands. Daniel looked older than she had imagined. Not worse, not diminished. Simply inhabited. His hair, once almost black, had gone silver at the temples in a way that seemed less like aging than weathering. His shoulders were still broad beneath the charcoal coat, though he carried one slightly lower now, as though some invisible weight had settled there and stayed. The face itself remained startlingly familiar. That was the difficult part. Time had altered details, but not the arrangement. Not the mouth she remembered refusing to answer questions, not the eyes. Eleanor, he said finally. Only her name, nothing attached to it, no surprise, no delight. No accusation. She nodded once. Daniel. Someone passing behind her brushed her elbow and apologized absently without stopping. The ballroom door stood open 20 feet away, releasing waves of conversation and piano music into the lobby. It was the second night of the architecture symposium. People were drinking too much expensive wine and pretending exhaustion was sophistication. She should not have come downstairs. After the afternoon panel, she had intended to stay in her room with a book she had not been reading for 3 days. But loneliness had a way of making even crowded rooms feel medicinal. So at 7:30, she put on lipstick she immediately regretted and came down anyway. Now here he was, alive, real, close enough that she could smell rain on his coat. You disappeared earlier, he said. I saw your name on the program and still came. Yes, a faint smile touched his mouth. That doesn't sound like you. No, she said quietly. I suppose it doesn't. Another silence arrived, this one less accidental. He looked at her carefully then, and she experienced the old sensation she had spent 2 decades training herself not to miss, the feeling of being observed by him completely. Daniel had always listened with his eyes first. It could feel like tenderness. It could also feel like exposure. You cut your hair, he said. I cut it 6 years ago. I'm late then. That seems consistent. He laughed softly at that. God, she thought, still that laugh, not loud, never careless, a laugh that suggested he found most things mildly tragic and occasionally beautiful. She folded her arms, more to steady herself than for warmth. You're speaking tomorrow morning? At 9. The restoration project in Lisbon, you remembered. I read the program. That isn't what I meant. His gaze dropped briefly toward the marble floor. No, he admitted. Suppose it isn't. The pianist inside the ballroom shifted into something slower. Several couples near the entrance had begun dancing in the graceless, self-conscious manner of educated people who rarely allowed themselves public joy. Eleanor looked toward them with relief. Movement elsewhere made stillness easier here. How long has it been? He asked. 23 years. You know exactly. Yes, and you counted. No, she said. I stopped counting. Then one day I realized I knew anyway. That landed between them with more force than she intended. Daniel glanced toward the bar. Would you like a drink? I don't think that's wise. Because of the alcohol? No. The corner of his mouth moved again, still direct. Only when I'm tired. And are you tired? She looked at him for a long moment before answering. Very, he nodded, as though he understood something larger than the word itself. A woman in a red silk dress approached then, touching Daniel lightly at the arm. There you are, she said. They're looking for you downstairs. She stopped when she noticed Eleanor. Beautiful woman, perhaps 50. Composed in the disciplined way certain women became composed after years of requiring competence from themselves regardless of emotional climate. Daniel straightened slightly. Eleanor, this is my wife, Marianne. There it was. Not pain exactly. Something stranger. A room inside herself quietly closing. Eleanor extended her hand. It's nice to meet you. And you, Marianne said warmly. You're speaking tomorrow as well, aren't you? Urban conservation? Yes. I heard your panel this afternoon. You were excellent. Thank you. Marianne turned back toward Daniel. Richard's already started arguing with the Danish delegation. You may want to intervene before there's an international incident involving concrete. I'll come down in a minute. She squeezed his arm once, familiar gesture, practiced intimacy. Then she smiled politely at Eleanor again and disappeared into the ballroom crowd. Eleanor watched her go. She's lovely, she said. She is, and intelligent. Yes, how long have you been married? 18 years. The precision of the answer did not escape her. Children? One daughter. How old? 17? Eleanor nodded slowly. He did not ask whether she had children. That omission hurt more than the question would have. You look disappointed, he said quietly. I'm not. You are, she exhaled. I think I'm adjusting to the fact that you became a person while I wasn't looking. Something changed in his expression then. Not dramatic, just a brief lowering of whatever defense his age had taught him. You say that as though you didn't. I became efficient, she said. It's not quite the same thing. From inside the ballroom came another burst of laughter. A waiter offered them champagne. Both declined automatically. Daniel slipped his hands into his coat pockets. Are you happy, he asked. The question arrived too quickly, too nakedly. Eleanor looked at him in disbelief. You don't get to ask me that in a hotel lobby after 23 years. Probably not, and yet you did. Yes, she studied him. There had once been a time when speaking to him felt like stepping onto thin ice willingly because the danger itself created clarity. Most people concealed themselves beneath conversation. Daniel somehow revealed himself there instead. It was one of the reasons she had loved him. It was also one of the reasons she left. Or perhaps that was dishonest. Perhaps she left because he did not ask her to stay. I had a husband, she said after a while. Had the word remained suspended there. Daniel's face altered almost imperceptibly. I didn't know. No, what happened? He died 4 years ago. Rain ticked softly against the tall windows behind them. Daniel removed one hand from his pocket, then seemed to think better of whatever gesture he had almost made. I'm sorry, he said. She nodded once. So am I. He waited. Not pushing, never pushing. Another old habit. He was kind, she said eventually. Steadier than you. I should hope so. A surprised laugh escaped her before she could stop it. He looked relieved to hear it. He taught literature, she continued. We lived in Vermont for a long time, then Boston after he retired. And were you happy? There you are again. Yes. She looked down at her own hands. Age had thinned them, blue veins beneath pale skin. Her wedding ring was gone now, though she still occasionally reached to touch it in unfamiliar rooms. I loved him, she said carefully. Daniel listened without blinking. But? He asked. There are some people, she said, who rearrange the architecture of your mind. Even after they're gone, you still move through the rooms differently. Neither of them moved. The piano music drifted through the ballroom doors like smoke. Daniel lowered his eyes briefly. That's an unfair thing to say to a married man. I know, and possibly an unfair thing to say about your husband. Yes. Did you love me very much? She almost smiled. What an astonishingly adolescent question. I'm asking it anyway. She turned toward the windows. Outside, rain silvered the dark street beyond the hotel entrance. Taxis slid through reflections of street lamps. Somewhere nearby, a siren moved briefly through the city and disappeared. When I was 30, she said softly, I honestly believed loving someone that much was evidence of poor character. Daniel said nothing. I thought it meant I lacked discipline, perspective. Self-respect, perhaps. She shook her head faintly. I was embarrassed by the scale of it. And now? Now I think it may simply have been true. He looked at her then with an expression so unguarded it frightened her slightly. She could not remain here much longer. Already the past was beginning to lose its proper proportions. A younger man exited the ballroom carrying 2 drinks and stopped abruptly upon seeing Daniel. There you are, he said. Marianne sent a search party. Daniel glanced toward Eleanor. I should go. Yes, neither moved. The younger man sensed something he did not understand and shifted awkwardly before retreating back through the ballroom doors. Eleanor folded her arms tighter. This was strange, she said. Yes, and probably unwise. Almost certainly, she nodded. Well, she should have left then. Instead, she heard herself ask, why didn't you marry me? The question stunned both of them. Daniel's face emptied completely. The sounds from the ballroom seemed suddenly distant. Eleanor felt heat rise into her throat. I'm sorry, she said quickly. That was because you asked me not to. She stopped. Rain against glass. Piano. A burst of laughter far away. I did not. You did. His voice remained calm, which somehow made it worse. Maybe not literally, but you made your wishes very clear. That isn't fair. No, he agreed. It probably isn't. She stared at him. At 58, one imagines oneself beyond the humiliations of youth. One believes memory has softened enough to handle. Then a single sentence returns you to the exact emotional temperature of another decade. You left for Rome, he said quietly. You remember that part, I assume. I had a fellowship. You had me. The words landed with devastating softness, not anger, not accusation, only fact. Eleanor looked away immediately. In all the years since, she had preserved a private version of their ending. Two ambitious young people. Bad timing, necessary sacrifices, a sadness handled maturely, but memory is a curator, not a historian. Certain details disappear because survival requires their disappearance. He never asked me to stay, she whispered. Daniel looked at her for a very long time. When exactly, he asked. Was I supposed to do that? She opened her mouth, closed it, because suddenly she remembered, not events, atmosphere. The cramped apartment in New Haven, summer heat through open windows, her certainty, her impatience with anything resembling dependency. The speech she gave him about women who surrendered careers for love and regretted it quietly forever. The look on his face while she spoke, not disagreement, recognition. Oh, she said, he nodded once. Yes. A terrible tenderness moved through her then, not only for him, for the two arrogant, frightened young people they had once been, so determined not to ruin their lives that they ruined something else instead. Daniel glanced toward the ballroom again. I should really, yes, of course, but neither moved. Again. It would have been easier if desire had vanished with age. People lied about this constantly. They transformed longing into anecdote once enough years passed, as though the body eventually became dignified. It did not. It merely became quieter. Eleanor became aware suddenly of his hands. The familiar shape of them, the vein near his wrist, ridiculous details to notice after 23 years apart. You're still angry with me, she said. Daniel considered the question seriously. No, he said at last, not angry. What then? He smiled sadly. Careful. Something in her chest tightened painfully. Inside the ballroom, someone called his name, this time louder. Daniel exhaled. If I don't go rescue Richard, Marianne will eventually have to do it herself, and she's a much more efficient destroyer of men than I am. Eleanor laughed despite herself. I'd believe that. She likes you, by the way. She met me 30 seconds ago. She's usually right quickly. That complicated things unnecessarily. Daniel, I know. No, she said softly. I don't think you do. He waited. She searched for language precise enough to survive the saying of it. I didn't expect. She stopped, began again. I thought enough time had passed for this to become smaller. His eyes held hers steadily. And has it? The truthful answer frightened her. Before she could speak, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He glanced down briefly at the screen. Something unreadable crossed his face. What is it? She asked. He looked back at her. My daughter, he said. She's at the hospital. Everything changed. Immediately. Completely. What happened? I don't know yet. He was already reaching for his coat, mind shifting elsewhere with the brutal speed of parental fear. Eleanor felt herself step toward him instinctively. Go, she said. He nodded distractedly, then stopped. For one suspended second, it seemed he might touch her face. Instead, he said very quietly, don't disappear again. Then he turned and walked quickly through the ballroom crowd toward the hotel entrance beyond. Eleanor remained standing beneath the chandelier long after he was gone. Around her, the evening continued flawlessly. Wine poured, music drifted. People mistook proximity for intimacy and called it romance. And somewhere across the city, a girl she had never met was sitting in a hospital, while the only man Eleanor had ever truly loved drove through the rain toward her.